So this is Fantastic Mr. Fox chapter 5 and it is called The Terrible Tractors. As the sun rose the next morning, Bogus and Bunce and Bean were still digging. They had dug a hole so deep you could have put a house into it. They had not yet come to the end of the Foxes' tunnel. They were all very tired and cross. "Dang and blast," said Bogus. "Whose rotten idea was this?" "Bean's idea," said Bunce. Bogus and Bunce both stared at Bean. Bean took another swig of cider, then put the flask back into his pocket without offering it to the others. "Listen," he said angrily. "I want that fox. I'm going to get that fox. I'm not giving in till I've strung him up over my front porch, dead as a dumpling." "We can't get him by digging, that's for sure," said the fat Bogus. "I've had enough of digging." Bunce, the little pot-bellied dwarf, looked up at Bean and said, "Have you got any more stupid ideas then?" "What?" said Bean. "I can't hear you." Bean never took a bath. He never even washed. As a result, his ear holes were clogged with all kinds of muck and wax and bits of chewing gum and dead flies and stuff like that. This made him deaf. "Speak louder," he said to Bunce. And Bunce shouted back, "Got any more stupid ideas?" Bean rubbed the back of his neck with a dirty finger. He had a boil coming there, and it itched. "We need on this job," he said. "Is machines. Mechanical shovels. We'll have 'em out in 5 minutes with mechanical shovels." This was a pretty good idea, and the other two had to admit it. "All right then," Bean said, taking charge. "Bogus, you stay here and see the fox doesn't escape. Bunce and I will go and fetch our machinery. If he tries to get out, shoot him quick." The long, thin Bean walked away. The tiny Bunce trotted after him. The fat Bogus stayed where he was with his gun pointing at the foxhole. Soon, 2 enormous caterpillar tractors with mechanical shovels on their front ends came clanking into the woods. Bean was driving one, Bunce the other. The machines were both black. They were murderous, brutal-looking monsters. "Here we go then," shouted Bean. "Death to the fox," shouted Bunce. The machines went to work, biting huge mouthfuls of soil out of the hill. The big tree under which Mr. Fox had dug his hole in the first place was toppled like a matchstick. On all sides, rocks were sent flying and trees were falling, and the noise was deafening. Down in the tunnel, the foxes crouched, listening to the terrible clanging and banging overhead. "What's happening, Dad?" cried the small foxes. "What are they doing?" Mr. Fox didn't know what was happening or what they were doing. "It's an earthquake!" cried Mrs. Fox. "Look!" said one of the small foxes. "Our tunnel's got shorter. I can see daylight." They all looked round, and yes, the mouth of the tunnel was only a few feet away from them now, and in the circle of daylight beyond they could see the 2 huge black tractors almost on top of them. "Tractors!" shouted Mr. Fox. "And mechanical shovels! Dig for your lives! Dig, dig, dig!" So, boys and girls, that was clearly a very drama-filled chapter, chapter 5 there. So your task today to follow up from this chapter involves our learning intention, which is to justify my opinion. Then that means you're going to get to give your own thoughts, just what you think. So there's not going to be any right or wrong answers in this task. It's totally just what you think. So your task is to write down how you think the foxes would have felt when the diggers crashed over their heads. So have a think about the emotions they felt. Would they have been sad, angry, or scared? Maybe Mr. Fox might have felt differently from Mrs. Fox, and they all might have felt differently from the baby foxes. Okay? You must write why you think this and aim to use the word because in each of your sentences. And I would love to see you all write at least 3 sentences in total. So I've put a wee example sentence at the bottom of this task, and you will notice I use the word because in my sentence. So let's have a read of it. I think that Mr. Fox was feeling very confused, but also scared because he did not know what was happening. So that's what I think, that's my opinion. So what do you think? So I could then go on to write a couple more sentences, such as I think Mrs. Fox was feeling scared because she was worried about her family. I think the baby foxes were scared because they were worried they would lose their house. Anything at all works, okay? But just make sure you're using that word because in there to give that little bit more information. So you've said how you think they're feeling, but you have to use because to say why you think they're feeling like that. What makes you think that is how they're feeling? So have a go at writing 3 sentences about how you think the foxes were feeling when those diggers crashed over their heads.